Greetings, everyone, and it's good to be with everyone again. And whatever time of day it is, whatever part of the world you're in, thank you for being here with us. And there is power in our coming together and using this technology and using it at the same time. So today we're doing track one of a three-track series called Re-enchantment. And I think we've done this before. But it's been a while. And I love these tracks. They're really, really good. And this track is just about 25 minutes long. And it usually seems like it's a lot less than that. But sometimes in meditation, 20 minutes can seem like a millennium, and 20 minutes can seem like 5 minutes. And in all altered states of consciousness, I think that's one of the things that people say about it, and it certainly uh, confirms Einstein's theory of relativity, that time is relative and that it is expressed differently at different places. It's not just one, and we certainly see that in spiritual practice and other altered states of consciousness. So today, I'm going to suggest that we simmer down, and I think that's what the Quakers put it. And if you're not familiar with the Quakers, they're really good guys, good folks. They're Christians that act like Christians for the most part, and they've always been the side of angels almost every time anything has come up politically. They had a big part in the abolitionist movement in England, outlawing slavery in England and all its colonies and possessions, and in the abolitionist movement in the United States. Also, they weren't always like that. And let's see, Pam, do you remember the Quaker that got the idea that slavery was not a good thing?
John Woolman.
John Woolman, yeah, it's a really great story. He was, they were very successful in their work because they were very honest, and they wouldn't cheat and they wouldn't lie to you. And often, in the early days back east, when when the colonists were dealing with the Native Americans, the Native Americans would insist on having the Quaker there because they knew the Quakers would not bullshit them, wouldn't lie to them, would tell them the truth. So that's pretty extraordinary. And so they were planners and had farms and they had slaves. Like that's just what humanity did back then, and Christianity looked at it, well, if you were born in the slave class, be a good slave and obey your masters. And if you're master class, then treat your slaves well. And that was it, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But anyway, John Woolman was not exactly, but he was probably in his meditation. And with the Quakers, it's a centering meditation. It's a silent meditation. So if you go to a traditional Quaker meeting, which I do recommend, you'll get together with a bunch of people and they'll just sit in silence for about 20, 30, 40 minutes, something like that. And then if anybody, whoever, has something they want to share with the group, they just stand up and share it with the group. They don't have a preacher. And it's a whole different type of ceremony, and very healing for me when I first encountered the Quakers. So anyway, back to John Woolman, and he just got the thing that slavery is not good, and shame on us. It's not what a Christian should be behaving. And so he went around he had a testimony, he had this calling, had this message to all the different Quaker communities in the United States at that time and the colonies, and said, we can't do this. And so the Quakers divested themselves of slaves, and they were cutting edge evolution at that time, but just to get to the point in humanity where we realized that slavery was just not acceptable anymore. And we had a big war in this country that abolished that and ended that, in which hundreds of thousands of people died. And they try to rewrite history and say slavery had nothing to do with it. Slavery had everything to do with it. If you read the Declarations of Independence of all the states that seceded from the United States, number one thing was don't mess with our slaves. You know, don't take away our slaves, don't outlaw our slaves, because we're making lots of money. And they just couldn't imagine proceeding without slaves. Well, they lost the war and figured out how to proceed without slaves. And, yeah, and there's still exists in the world in certain places, but at a certain level of ethical growth, when you move into modernism, that's all men are created equal. Remember that? That stuff just, which is a modernist. I mean, one of the first powerful documents and sayings of the evolutionary modern movement and democracy, and all men are created equal and have equal rights. And this was like, just how did that fit with slavery? Well, the fact is, it really didn't. And they didn't know quite how to do away with it and become independent as a united group. So they put it off for another generation to figure out, and they certainly did. Civil War. So anyway, God bless John Woolman, and that's part of the power of deep interior prayer, centering prayer, and it started the ball rolling that ended slavery in our country. And I'm not sure how it affected England, because Britain was a little ahead of us, and I think they abolished slavery in 1830s or something like that. I wasn't going to talk about that, but anyway, sometimes we have heroes that should be acknowledged, and that came out of interior practice. So all the great, and even the not great, but all the great spiritual traditions in the world, if you get beyond the different languages and dogmas and rituals and stuff, they're all basically saying the same thing, that inside of us is where the deep truth, ground of being of the universe, the kingdom of God, Atman, resides. And spiritual practice, silent spiritual practice, still is largely an effort to connect us with that part of ourselves. So then we it's something of a death and rebirth experience. You die to the old idea of yourself in the limited form, and it come back connected and much expanded to the whole cosmos, which is Brahman, which is God, which is the ground of being. It's my Sharakarsh. So that, and it not only is that, but it sustains it moment to moment. And when we get in touch with that part of ourselves, then we can see out and see that it's all God, if you will, and thou art that. And I'll tell a little story on the other side of this meditation. So, but let's thank you for being here, and thank you for the fact that you've evolved in such a place that you will sit in stillness with other people all over the world. That's a huge thing in itself. And one Buddhist teacher said, meditation is enlightenment. I went so far to say that. So this is it's important. It's good. And the only hope, and the great task of our time is the waking up of enough human beings to love and compassion and wisdom and connection. with ourselves, with all other creatures, with the cosmos, the living conscious cosmos that all the mystics talk about. So, but I'll stop talking about it. So this is a 25-minute meditation. It's a re-enchantment track one. It takes us to alpha, which is a really nice, focused brainwave. And it was back when they started looking at meditators and brainwaves, they thought that this was the ultimate kind of the best brainwave to meditate with. And there's others that we use, but it ain't bad. So without further ado, let's roll this. Sit up straight. Act, sit as if you are a prince or princess or king or queen of the kingdom, and align your spine, your shoulders. Sit up straight and just deeply, deeply, deeply relax. So, Sabi, let's roll. Okay, here we go. That's a lovely track. I had an interesting meditation at a certain point. My track would stop after a minute, a couple of minutes. I don't know exactly how much time it is. It's just like, okay, get it going again. And it came to me that that was just my meditation, and meditations like that often, we're sitting down, we're cultivating inner stillness, and our mind is galloping off something. Sometimes we can catch it and bring it back to center. And other times it goes off, and all of a sudden, my God, it's been 10 minutes tripping on something. But anyway, this was like, hey, I just have to be really centered, really be with this now. And then it cuts off, and I have to go back and fix my phone. So wasn't bad. I just had to, hey, this is my meditation day. It's return, stop, turn, stop, turn, stop. So yeah, so little story. It's one of my favorite that I'll try to get through pretty briefly. But there was a man in some far off place, far, far away and long ago, and he was trying to find enlightenment. And he knew that there was a master living up on top of the mountains. It's probably in a cave. And he climbed and through all this and got there and said, Master, come. I want to know the meaning of life. I want to know the ultimate truth. And what is it? And I said, okay, this is it. There is only God, and thou art that. No, that's, I think he's pulling my leg. I think that's silly. I think it's not right. So anyway, he goes and goes through all these misadventures, trying to find this ultimate truth. And finally, there in one of the big cities, there's this ashram, very famous teacher and master. And he tells him, he goes and, Master, I've been searching for years and all of this stuff to try to find the truth, this ultimate truth. And I said, okay, it's no desire. And he gives him a task to do, which was there were big stables next to the ashram because people would bring their horses and donkeys and camels or whatever they were riding back in this mystical land. And you need to shovel the manure. And there was a lot of manure because there was a lot of animals, and this was a big deal. So we'd come back, complete a X amount of time, let's say a year, and come back to the master and say, no, go back and keep shoveling. So did that. Finally, after 7 years, he says, okay, I think you're ready. Okay. Because at this time he was really tired of shoveling manure. And the master said, there is only God, and thou art that. And he finally gets it. Just, okay, there it is. There it is. There it is. And he said, why didn't you tell me years ago? Just because you weren't ready. Obviously, if you'd been ready when he met the old master up on the old wise man up on the mountain, he would have gotten it back then, but he wasn't. So sometimes it seems that we have to go through years of shoveling manure before and that's an interesting, maybe sometimes in meditation we shovel manure to get down to that center, get down to that hidden treasure that is like the all. And I think basically that is my dog, Tatum. Anyway, that's the ultimate thing, and we forget, or we don't know, or maybe we have an intellectual idea of it, but it's not a personal experience. And so ultimately in the there's many purposes to meditation. It could be to deal with stress, it could be to help deal with depression, it could be to focus the mind, so you're, a better accountant or a better writer, or whatever you do, better baseball player, whatever it is. But then the ultimate kind of where this came from, its most ancient roots, is that ultimate realization. As the Hindus say in the Upanishads, that Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman, and Atman is that, that place inside, that deep place, that through all the layers, through the darkness, where the ground of being, where God resides in each one of us, in every creature. And Brahman is the Godhead, if you will, the all of the all. And it says that you are that, and that is you. You are that, and that is you. You get that? It's like, okay. And as I was saying earlier, sometimes it feels like a death because, all the ego stuff and all that just seems to fall away, and you just have this experience. But eventually all that stuff comes back. And it's just, Ken Wilber says, we transcend all of our little stuff, yet at the same time, we include it. Why? Because that's God also. There's nothing to get rid of that's not God. I mean, that's, all of our stuff, all our foibles, all our neuroses, all our wounds, all our silly ideas, all of that in some mysterious way is the fuel for the work of the universe to be done in us. And it has to be honored. And it's okay to accept our absolute humanity, as well as taste the transcendent, the big one that is also the little one, that is also you and me and everyone else. And one thing I found in my years of shoveling manure and my spiritual questing is that the spiritual teachers that I met that were the real deal, there was something extremely kind and sweet and humble about them. Okay, and right now I recommend this book. I'm reading this. This is by Matthew Fox, one of my spiritual heroes. He was a Catholic priest for years, a Dominican, and he got silenced. Anyway, so finally he became an Episcopalian, and they welcomed him with open arms. So he was still a priest, but he's an Episcopalian priest. He's written so much. And this is a book about Meister Eckhart, and he is one of our great Western mystics that many from the East and spiritual teachers from outside of the Catholic West have said that it's a lot easier if you're a Hindu or a Buddhist or even a Sufi to understand Meister Eckhart than an American or that a Western Protestant to understand. And incredibly enlightened. And of course, he was taken to the Inquisition, and they had this huge trial, and he defended himself. And finally they said, well, and this is really subtle, I don't understand it. I don't know if they were going to burn him at the stake anyway, but they said that you're not a heretic, but 29 of your teachings are heretical. And before that came down, Meister Eckhart died. But because of that, he was kept out of the mainstream Catholic Church for centuries, and it just reflected him, and you just read him, and it's like so beautifully done. And of course, it's presented by Matthew Fox, and he compares them to all these different mystics, and they have chapters where depth psychology or unitive experience, all these different things, and brings in all these great teachers. So very inspiring. And he just came back in the last few decades where he's been recognized again as a great teacher. And probably if they hadn't silenced him or declared his teachings heretical, the Reformation would have never been necessary. I mean, there was that mystical core that could have had done great good and transformed things, but that didn't happen. So, yeah. So, with Matthew Fox, I went there. He has this university in Oakland, It's called Creation Spirituality University, I think. And that's his school of theology. He calls it creation spirituality, which I love because he connects it to the earth and to nature. And that is definitely one of the ways that I've experienced God, if you will, is in nature, in the wild, sleeping under the stars, hiking through the canyons, being in the desert, being in the mountains. And I went there really early because I wanted to get a front seat. And I was really excited to hear Matthew speak. And I got there and there was nobody there except Matthew. So we spent about a half hour sitting in chairs and just hanging out together. And he was sitting at the chairs getting ready for his talk. And anyway, again, that sweetness, humility, and loving energy that is, I think, so true of those who have been through the fire and come out on the other end. So God bless him. And yeah, that's probably it. So your homework, if you choose to do it, is to remember that there is only God. That's a big one. It's hard to, in your rational mind, you can't wrap that around. But there is only God, and thou art that. So sit with that as a koan or a mantra, and you know, God bless you in your quest and your searching in your inner work. And don't worry how deep you go, because there's no place to go but God, right? And there's a lot of stuff, you know, that can seem dark and confusing and ridiculous, but or evil or dark or whatever it is, but you keep going, you accept the shadow, you accept that, and you stay there, and there it is. Thou art that, God. Okay, well, thank you for being here again, and namaste, and matakwiyas, and God bless you.